Highway 120 leads from California's farmland in the Central Valley to Yosemite, one of the crown jewels of America's national parks. Millions of visitors travel to Yosemite every year, and many of them take this scenic and historic highway up a very steep hill called Priest Grade. When you get to the top, you'll encounter Priest Station, a hidden gem with an interesting history that reaches back to the days of the gold rush.
Priest Station was built in 1849 to service all the miners for the gold rush. This was, right now it's a town of 100, had 20,000 back then. And my family supplied all the miners. We fed them, sold them shovels, owned the roads, kind of an all-round full service. We didn't pick up the shovels ourselves, but we fed all the miners. And then a lot of gold rush towns ended up disappearing, but right when the gold kind of ran out, Yosemite came. My ancestor, William Priest, was the first commissioner of Yosemite. He had built the road into Yosemite, but was really viewed as one of the wonders of the world, and that kept us open.
Before William Priest, however, were Alexander Kirkwood and his wife Margaret, the founders of the business in 1849.
And then he went back to Scotland. On the way back, on the return journey, he contracted malaria in Panama and died right at the bottom of the hill.
Kirkwood's widow Margaret had upwards of 60 marriage proposals and finally chose William Priest to be her second husband. Margaret ran the hotel while William was overseeing the road construction into Yosemite, and it's for these pioneers that we have the name Priest Station today.
Because Mr. and Mrs. Priest had no children, they brought my mother, Mrs. Priest's niece, Jessie Carla, from Scotland to work with them in the hotel in the 1880s. For many years, Priest Hotel served as headquarters for the Big Oak Flat Road to Yosemite. The opening of the road each spring was a big event. My father, uncles, and others would take teams and wagons up the road for about 2 weeks in order to clear it after the winter storms. It was always a treat when they returned with fresh trout and snow plants from the high mountains. To add to the excitement was the return of the stagecoaches and the tourists. Mrs. Priest always slept with a small Derringer pistol under her pillow, and it accompanied her when she rode up the road to Yosemite and Tioga to collect the week's receipts from the toll collectors. I accompanied Auntie Priest several times on these trips to the toll stations. The hotel served as a major stopover for tourists traveling to Yosemite. In those days, this was a long trip, so they would often arrive late at night, tired and very dusty after coming up the steep road from Moccasin.
They used to send the dogs down, and they would get the dinner order, tie it to the neck of the dogs. The dogs would come back home, and they could get a jump start on because back then there was no refrigeration. You needed turkey, you had to go out and get it yourself a turkey.
Regardless of the hour, Auntie Priest or my parents would meet them and provide them with a big evening meal. The hotel grew its own cattle, sheep, pigs, and poultry. The Chinese cooks ran the kitchen and cared for the large gardens. I loved to walk with my father while he plowed and planted all the hay fields around Priests.
The well that you see out there, that's from 1849. That was the original well. And it was a natural place to stop, but also they had water, and that was able to feed the gardens, that was able to, and they really had an ingenious water system. And there was a pool up over there. The pool would fill up over the summer, and then when things dried down, they'd use that to water all the gardens. The greenhouse that you see up there, that house was built in the 1870s and then rolled down on logs from Big Oak Flat here. And the way you'd move a house back then is you just get a bunch of logs, roll it a little bit, then take the log, put it in front, and that came from Big Oak Flat down. That was from the 20s.
But then tragedy struck in the form of a wildfire that destroyed Priest's Hotel.
August 5th, 1926 is a day I will never forget. That was the day the Priest Hotel burned. The fire moved slowly down and over from Deer Flat to Grizzly Gulch, threatening Priests on August 2nd and 3rd. My parents and our friends safely stored our valuables in the tunnel under the road. They returned everything on August 5th when they believed the fire was under control. But then the fire heated up again when the afternoon wind started up the canyon, and it took only about 20 minutes for it to reach Priests. The neighbors helped us save a few things, but we didn't save much. The fire burned all 22 buildings, including the hotel, 2 big stagecoach barns, and the houses.
The foundation over there that you still see the remnants of, that was the owner's house before the 20s fire. And so my great-grandfather could kind of sit there and look and see when people came in. He could be on the porch and kind of keep an eye peeled up. After the fire happened, he went and walked down the road and had a good cry, because it was his life work. But who knows whether he couldn't have sustained it, because it was going down anyways, just because of the car and the depression, and it was a tough time. After the war, the cabins were built. My grandfather built 1 cabin each year, from 45 through 49. Each cabin was built. Yeah. He liked knotty pine. That was his thing.
Joseph and Margaret Anker operated the hotel, restaurants, and cabins until 1969. Then they sold the property and moved to the bigger town of Sonora, about 15 miles to the north. But there was always a connection to the land, which was renamed Priest Station after the second hotel from the 1920s was lost to fire as well.
The place went downhill, and it was always very sad for us to go by. My grandmother would drive by and get a little teary seeing what it had become, because people would drive in, and it was the first thing you kind of saw, and it was a bit sad. And it was something that we had always wanted to do. 10 years ago, came up for sale, and the family really wanted to get back again. And so we all got together, and now here we are.
As John Muir once said, "The mountains are calling, and I must go." It seems this is true of the Anker family as well, and the Priest family before them.
My father really learned the mountains around here in Yosemite because every summer he'd work up in the mountains. He worked as a packer for building some of the cabins, and he really knew the area really well. And my grandfather and all that, and then my great-grandfather, because we had owned the roads, the Tioga Pass Road and also the old Big Oak Flat Road to Yosemite. Those were private roads. And my great-grandfather, when he'd open up the Tioga Pass, he used to swim Lake Tenaya in the spring. And that was a chilly lake, right, with snow everywhere, but he was a hardy guy. And, my brother's a professional mountain climber, Conrad Anker, that's what he does. And everything he learned about the mountains, he learned from coming here. Because my dad would take us out every year. We'd go up into the mountains, we'd go up into the high country, and kind of that country knowledge, or the knowledge of the mountains and everything, and the love for it, he got from, it's in his blood. For all of us, we still, have a deep connection to it. And all the ghosts of our family are here. Everyone was born here and died here, and they're all still kind of around, but we'd like to keep the chain going.
Today, Priest Station is a favorite of locals and world travelers alike. You can stay in one of the historic 1940s cabins, hand-built by Steve's grandfather, and have what's been voted the best breakfast on the hill while you watch the world go by. Priest Station serves all kinds of foods for all kinds of people. From German dishes like Helga's potato salad to vegan burgers with freshly made potato chips.
We get every spectrum of humanity. We get people from all over the world, every culture, every language, people from San Francisco, the rich Bay Area people. We get a lot of locals. I wouldn't be open if it weren't for the locals. I like that's a social place that people come together and hang out and talk. It's very neighborly. There was once a lady, some neighbors' cows had gotten out, and she decided to stand in the middle of the road and had a wand and wanted to have blessings so the cows would be safe, which, but you can't really stand in the middle of a highway. It is a highway and a lot of traffic. Then I think she was kind of shooed on by the police. But then the next morning, she was naked in the field doing blessings for the cows. It was just, it was a little unsettling. Right now, because we have vegetarians, we have Hindus, we have Muslims, and what's great is that we'll have people visiting from other parts of the country, and the countries are at war, but they can sit down and eat next to each other. We all eat, and we can be civil to one another. My dream is it would be great to do what my great-grandfather did with having everything grown here. We're doing the same thing that has been done for a long time. It's since the 1870s, I guess, we're serving travelers to Yosemite.
You'll find Priest Station where Highway 120, Old Priest Grade, and Priest Coulterville roads meet at the top of the hill. Warning, Old Priest Grade is a very steep, narrow, winding road that is not recommended for first-time visitors, and RVs and trucks are prohibited. Priest Station is wheelchair accessible, and the outside dining area is pet-friendly. There's also ample parking. The hours are seasonal and reduced in the wintertime, so be sure to plan ahead so that you don't miss this historic hidden gem of California's gold country.